Under normal circumstances, devoid of context, Pitt's loss to Clemson on Saturday might be viewed as not being all that bad. I mean, when you're playing a tough conference opponent at home, at home or on the road, but I mean, this game happened to be at home. You're playing a tough conference opponent, a good team in your league. You play them close, you take it to overtime, you end up coming up a little bit short, but it's a good battle. You're every bit the equal, obviously, as you can send the game to overtime. I mean, it's what happens in college basketball. I mean, it's hard to go undefeated. Nobody goes undefeated. You lose some games. It happens. I mean, we saw enough, we know enough from the old Big East days that you're not going to beat everybody. And some nights it's just going to go the other way. The other team's going to win. Some nights the other team is just going to get the better of you, but you put up a good, valiant battle, and you came up a little bit short, but that's okay. Devoid of context. In a vacuum, that's how that game would be viewed. In a vacuum, it wouldn't be all that bad. But, of course, things don't happen in a vacuum. Things don't happen without context, and we know very well that there is context for Pitt's loss to Clemson on Saturday. We know very well that there is a background here, that it's not happening in a vacuum, and that it wasn't just a loss. It wasn't just an overtime loss to a conference opponent. It was the fourth loss in a row. And the concerns, which have been growing, didn't really stop on Saturday, despite the fact that Pitt played well, and quite frankly, out of their 4-game losing streak, probably played the best they've played. I think they played better against Clemson than they played against Duke, Louisville, Florida State. But they found another way to win, a different way to win. This time it was 3-point defense. The Duke game, it was a major talent disparity. The Louisville game, it was offensive rebounding, giving up too many offensive rebounds. The Florida State game, it was just a terrible first half. They played abysmally on offense in the first half. And while they weren't all that much better in the first half, on Saturday against Clemson, they scored 30 as opposed to 26, which is what they scored at Florida State. They overall, I think it was a better performance. And certainly the second half, they rounded into form, played well on defense, and did enough offensively to at least get the game into overtime and give themselves a chance to get a good win. Instead, it goes as I hate to call it a good loss, but it goes as a not bad loss. The problem is the opportunities for good wins are dwindling. And the opportunities for bad losses are going to start increasing. And the more you run into those opportunities for bad losses, if you keep making the mistakes you've been making in the last 4 games, if you keep having the errors and miscues and curious and maybe even just downright seemingly wrong lineup decisions and personnel moves, you're putting yourself in jeopardy of taking one of those bad losses. And at this point, the only thing you can really hang on to with this Pitt team, the one saving grace, if there is one, is that they haven't taken a bad loss yet. By this point last year, they already had, I think, a couple. Certainly the Missouri game was one, and I think they had a Syracuse game that would ultimately be held against them as well, though I forget exactly where that Syracuse game ended up. But they don't have any bad losses yet. Those opportunities are going to come. For now, you can hold on to the fact that they haven't had any of those bad losses. If they start taking a few of those, the concerns will outweigh the optimism or potential for this season to end well. It's not there yet. I said this on the message board yesterday that Pitt is in a disappointing stretch. It's going to take a few more games for it to become a disappointing season, but certainly you can see that outcome up ahead. You can see that exit ramp to the disappointing season coming up. We'll see if Pitt's able to avoid it. All right, let's talk about the game, the Clemson game. Let's talk about what we saw at Pitt, why things didn't go well, and what we can take out of it, what lessons there might be to learn, anything encouraging or positive that came out of that game, and what Pitt might be able to do going forward. They've got a week off here to retool things and tinker with things and maybe fix things. We'll see what they can potentially retool, tinker, and fix over the next week before they go to Syracuse on Saturday and try to break this losing streak. We've got a lot of basketball to talk about here on the Morning Pit, so let's get the week started on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, 78-75 was the final for Pitt against Clemson on Saturday at the Peterson Event Center. I meant to look up what the official attendance announced is 10,584. I wasn't at the game. Jim covered it for us, so I'll have to take his word on what he thought the attendance was or what you thought the attendance was. Actually, we're not going to get into an attendance conversation and crowd conversation and Oakland Zoo conversation. There's something to be talked about there, but we're not going to dig into that today. We're just going to talk about Pitt's loss to Clemson, why it happened, and what needs to happen going forward. Of course, what we need to happen is for you to like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That's where we put all of our Pitt video content, these daily morning Pitt videos, our weekly live stream that we do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. unless we have something else going on that night. We move it to a different time or a different day, but we always let you know, and you can always make sure you don't miss it if you subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com and turn on your notifications, because then you'll get an alert sent to your phone every time we do something here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Don't forget, right below, it's the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It's where you get all of your Pitt sports coverage, Pitt football, basketball, recruiting, transfer portal, everything going on in the world of Pitt sports. We covered at Panther-Lair.com. And on the message boards, you can hang out with other Pitt fans to talk about Pitt sports. All day, every day, Pitt fans are discussing Pitt sports on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. And when the football team loses 6 games in a row and the basketball team is on a 4-game losing streak, I can't say that it's always going to be good, but it is always happening. The conversations are always going down, so you can always be a part of it at Panther-Lair.com. This game, like I said, in the open there, in a vacuum, it was encouraging. In a vacuum, you battled a tough conference opponent and went to overtime and just happened to end up coming up short. It's okay. In college I always appreciate this about college basketball. You can have games like this where you put up a good fight, you take a pretty talented team down to the wire, and going to overtime would certainly count as that. You make plays to get yourself in the game, particularly if you fall behind by, they were down 10 at halftime. At one point, they were down 14 in the second half. You fall behind by a lot. You make a lot of plays to get back into it. You take it to, you tie the game. Took a lead even. Took a lead, in overtime. Had a lead late in the second half. You give yourself a lot of opportunities. And, well, just so happens that they made one extra shot or one more shot than you did. It's okay. But this isn't in a vacuum. If they'd beaten Florida State, in Louisville, let's say if they beat Duke, lost to Duke, won the next 2 games, and then came out and lost this game on Saturday, nobody would be happy about it. But you say, okay, well, it's all right. That's how it goes. You have games like that, but that's they're still in good shape. They'd be 5-2 in the conference as opposed to 3-4. They would be 14-4 overall as opposed to 12-6. And it's the losing streak is the problem. And there's a lot of things that happened in this game on Saturday, a lot of things that went wrong. I don't think it was the same thing as what happened in the first 3 losses, which is good and bad. It's not like there's one single issue that's killing this team game after game, but at the same time, they're sort of finding different ways to lose every game. And there are some common threads. There's some themes that connect, each game, but they are, the major reason for the loss in each of these 4 defeats has been different. The only thing that really kind of lines up is the rebounding. They've lost 6 games to major conference competition. They've been out rebounded in all 6 of those. This game against Clemson, I think, was the closest rebounding margin they've had in a loss. They got out rebounded by 2 and actually held Clemson to 10 offensive rebounds, which, was a pretty massive improvement. Now, Clemson also shot 51% from the floor. You have fewer opportunities for offensive rebounds when you shoot that well. But they did, they were closer with Clemson in rebounds than they've been against pretty much any other team they've lost to. Florida State, Louisville, Duke, Mississippi State, and Wisconsin all out-rebounded Pitt by significantly more. I mean, Mississippi State was plus 22 against Pitt, and there were some other gaudy numbers in there. Louisville, of course, with the 17 offensive rebounds. Duke was plus 15, I think, against Pitt on the boards. And so that issue is probably the one that is connecting through all of these games. And I'm not really sure how much better they're going to get at it. I'm not really sure how much improvement you can. I don't know if you can become a better rebounding team mid-season, unless there's something you can do sort of schematically, structurally in how you play offense or how you play defense to give yourself more opportunities for rebounds. I was watching the Bills-Ravens game last night, and midway through, they showed a stat of the Ravens, their defense and defensive ranks in the first 10 games, and then defensive ranks since then. It was a major turnaround, but I think there's probably things you can adjust to play better defensively. More so than there are things you can adjust to become a better rebounding team. Some of it is just, some people are just natural rebounders. There is something to be said for effort. A lot of times rebounds can come down to effort and physicality and aggressiveness and toughness and just the desire to impose your will. And maybe this Pitt team lacks that to a certain extent. But it probably is going to be an issue for them all season. That's probably not going to change. And so I can sit here and bemoan the fact that they don't rebound all that well and they get out rebounded pretty consistently against power conference competition, but it's not really going to change. And so, I think if you're Jeff Capel, if you're this team, and even those of us on the outside, you have to find ways for the team to win that overcome how you're going to probably lose on the boards against most teams you face from here on out. So I set that aside. I set that aside as an issue to contend with because I don't know what the fix is there. It's something Jeff Capel and his staff will work on this week, I'm sure, but I don't know how you fix it. There are other things, though, that are worth noting and worth discussing and potentially can be adjusted. I think... I mean, it's such a dead horse topic at this point, but it's not one that has been completely put to bed because it continues to be a topic and an issue and a point of contention, and that's the center play and the rotation at center. And I think on Saturday, the first half, it was all Cam Corrin and Papa Amadou Conti. Papa played 4 minutes, I think, at center. Although he was the first sub in. He came in for Cam Corrin, actually, just about 6 minutes into the game. But we didn't see Guillermo Diaz-Graham get any minutes at center until the second half. Now, I, for one, was happy to see Guillermo get any minutes in the second half after he was basically invisible in the last two games after halftime. He played a lot in the second half. And actually, where are his minutes numbers here? Guillermo played 17 minutes in the second half and played a lot of those minutes, a decent chunk of those minutes at center. And I think that actually he played about 9 minutes at center. So more than half of his minutes in the second half came at the center position. And in those minutes, plus another 2 minutes he played at center in overtime. So Guillermo was on the court for almost 10 minutes of time in the second half and overtime where he played center. And in those minutes, Pitt was plus 12. They outscored Clemson. I think it was 25-13 with Guillermo at center. Now, that's not a 100% correlation causation thing. I'm not going to say Pitt was plus 12 on Clemson because Guillermo played the center position. But I'm pretty sure in the final... Oh, that was a Jorge stat. I'm going to save the Jorge stat. Sorry, I was getting mixed up there. I've stats on the Diaz-Graham twins that I think make certain cases for them. But with Guillermo at center, Pitt was better. This is a game they're trailing by 14 at one point. It's obviously tied at the end of regulation. They lose by 3 in overtime. With Guillermo at center, they're plus 12. Big part of the comeback. They go on an 18-8 run after they put Guillermo in at center. So they're plus 10 over the course of 8 minutes there. And, they have a chance. They have a chance because of the lineup that features him playing the 5. I'm not suggesting that Guillermo should play all of the minutes at the 5, but a more sort of frequent rotation, because I think Cam Corrin is useful, and I think he showed it to a certain extent. He was 7 of 7 from the floor on Saturday. He brings offense. And, you sacrifice some defense, transitioning from Federico to Cam Corrin. You added offense, and this is what it looks like. Rebounding might be a wash, honestly, between what Federico was last year and what Cam Corrin has done this year on the boards. But you sacrificed some defense and added some offense, and he's, I think Saturday was one of the better games he's played in a while. I think he's living up to it. As far as the offense goes, his defense hasn't been great, and his rebounding hasn't been great, but he's able to score, which is valuable. Cam Corrin did not have any rebounds in the second half on Saturday. He played 11 minutes, scored 4 points in the second half. Did not grab any rebounds. But I think a rotation there, really kind of moving between Corrin, Guillermo, and Papa Amadou Conti, you can probably, I think you can get some pretty effective play. If Corrin and Guillermo play 15 to 17 minutes each, some combination thereof, and Papa Amadou Conti makes up the other 6 to 10 minutes, I think you could actually have a pretty effective rotation at center that plays well and succeeds. Honestly, I think it would be a good setting. It does seem like things work a little better with Guillermo at the 5. And I don't want to belabor this point because it's I talk about how Pitt fans are always on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com talking about Pitt sports. I mean, they are always on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com talking about how Guillermo should play more center. This is one of the most common topics on the board, and understandably so, because it seems like it works better. It just seems more effective. So that's one thing that has to be resolved. Finding a role for Jorge Diaz-Graham. He comes in the game at Florida State. Keys a pretty big run. Pitt goes on a 15-4 run to get back into that game. Jorge had 10 out of those 15 points. He finished with 15 points all in the second half, all playing 13 minutes in the second half. And then he gets 4 minutes, doesn't even attempt a shot against Clemson on Saturday. I think part of that might have been that Pitt needed more defense. I don't think Jorge's a great defensive player. He can obviously add offense, but I think Jeff Capel probably felt like defense was what they needed in terms of stopping the three-point shot and defending Clemson beyond the arc, just because Clemson happens to be the best three-point shooting team in the conference. So maybe that explains it, but I think there's still got to be a role out there. I think there has to be a way, and Jorge allows you to play Guillermo more at the 5. Jorge fills in that depth at the 4 and allows you to get Guillermo into the 5 more. Because if you don't have another 4, then you need Guillermo to play there. And then the minutes and the opportunities for him at center are limited. So I think Jorge serves a purpose in that regard, in addition to the fact that he can drain threes and he's kind of shooting out of his mind this season. So I think there has to be a role for him. And then you got to figure something out with the guards. And I don't know what that is. On Friday in the 3-2-1 column, I wrote about, I'd like to see more lineups with 2 guards, 2 wings, and a center. Lowe, Leggett, Austin, Jorge, and either Corrin or Guillermo. I don't think we saw that at all. No, we did actually. There was when Jorge was in, he was in for a few rotations. A couple of those, it was Lowe, Dunn, Austin, Jorge, and Papa Amadou Conti, and then Cam Corrin replaced Conti. So you got about 2.5 minutes of that 2-guard, 2-wing center lineup. And I don't really think of it, if Guillermo's playing the 4, I don't really think of it as being 2 wings the way I do when it's Austin and Jorge, as opposed to Austin and Guillermo. But I think you have to find a role for Jorge to fit into that 2-guard, 2-wing center look. I think they can do a lot of things out of that. I think you've got good shooters on the court when you've got that lineup out there. I think the guards are able to kind of move a little bit more. I think there's more spacing that gets created. I just think it's a better overall lineup and probably gives them their best chance to win going forward. Now, I don't know if Jeff Capel sees it that way. Maybe it's matchup dependent. Maybe it just depends on the game, and he'll do whatever the game sort of calls for. But they've obviously got to figure out what they want these guards to do and what they want these guards to be. And this is probably my biggest point. And I saved it for last, and we'll just barely touch on it, and then we'll probably dig into it more this week because we have a whole week to talk about this stuff. This team still needs to figure out who they want to be, what they want to do, how they want to do it. because I still don't think they have a really great sense. There are times where it looks like they know who they are and what they want to be and what they want to do. But then there's a lot of times where it just doesn't. It just breaks down to, and we could have a long conversation about this, about hero ball, right? About dribbling around and then just driving to try to score or taking a deep three. And there's times where those shots go down, and there's times when those shots do not. And when they do, everybody loves it. And when they don't, not so much. And there's a great picture of Jalen Lowe attempting some hero ball right there as he drives to the basket. There's good and bad that comes with the guard play. Figuring out how to get the most good possible. And eliminating as much bad as possible without sacrificing opportunities for good. I don't think there's anything more important as they go down the stretch. And there are things you can do around it. Maybe having Jorge out there more, or having Guillermo at the 5 more. Maybe that helps open up options for the guards to facilitate and move and run the offense. But when it comes down to it, this team is going to win as much as they win, or lose as much as they lose, because of Jalen Lowe and Ishmael Leggett. I'm still of the mind that those two will help them win a lot. I'm still of the mind that this team can pull itself out of the current, swoon and get some wins and avoid those bad losses, which should ultimately, lead to them being in the NCAA tournament. But it's really going to come down to whether or not these guards figure out who they are, who their team is, what their offense is, and how to really run it. And some of that's going to come from coaching too. Like Jeff Capel and his staff, I think they've got some things to really work on this week and some things to really focus on this week. Whether they do and whether we see the results of it, anything tangible on Saturday at Syracuse, that remains to be seen. My guess is we won't, but I'm sure they'll try and work on things. But hey, the thing I keep coming back to is Jalen Lowe took a really deep, unnecessary 3-point shot late in overtime. He missed. If he makes it, we're talking about how the play of Lowe and Leggett will elevate this team and carry them into March. But he missed. So we're talking about how they play too much hero ball and need to pass more, not just dribble around and take, step back threes. It's funny how that works out. But, it's that's what it comes down to. We say hero ball as a derogatory term when the ball doesn't go through the hoop, but when it does go in, we praise the hero ball. So it's something we're gonna have to figure out. It's something we'll talk about this week. We'll talk about the state of these guards and the situation with these guards and what they have and what they need to do. We'll also talk about the remaining schedule and what Pitt's got on tap, the kind of opportunities they have coming up starting on Saturday at Syracuse, and everything beyond that as the schedule starts to wind down. I mean, as we get close to February, we're pretty close to the postseason. So we'll be talking about the remaining schedule. We'll get into some football stuff with recruiting and transfer portal. We got a lot of things to talk about during this week off for Pitt basketball. It's a week off for the Pitt basketball team, but it's not a week off for the Morning Pitt. So make sure you tune in right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That way you don't miss any of our Pitt video content. And of course, check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Hope you had a great weekend. Enjoy your Monday. Stay warm. It is a cold one out there. What is this, Miami Beach? We will catch up with you tomorrow for the Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.